Welcome to the Beth Yeshua Podcast. For more episodes like this, visit bethyeshua.org/media. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Beth Yeshua Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Rubenstein, and today I'm with my mom, Shari Rubenstein. Hi, Mom.
Hey.
And we're going to be doing a few things today. We are going to do a Messianic superpower at the beginning to get started, and then we're going to do a debrief on what it was like for my mom to go to the UMJC. She was our voting delegate. As a full congregation membership, we get 2 votes in all of these kind of like governmental sort of votes that were happening. We're going to debrief that, and then we're going to play another round of kosher or trafe, which should be really fun. Once again, I do want to remind you, if you have an idea for a podcast, shoot us an email. You can do that on our website at bethyeshua.org. There's a little contact form, or you can just send an email to Rosh, that's R-O-S-H, like head, Rosh at bethyeshua.org. And then if you want to see us instead of just hear us, you can go to YouTube or Spotify. Either of those will allow you to actually see our faces as we discuss controversial things and maybe, upset people. Okay, so today we're going to get started with, if you could be a Messianic superhero, what would your superpower be? Do you want to start us off, Mom?
Sure. I think having come from the conference is especially important. If I had a superpower, I would not only be able to float, and not float, but fly, but I would be able to attach people to myself and bring them wherever I needed them to go. Okay. And I say that because when we're at the conference and the delegates meeting and we're making all these big decisions, there is no absentee vote. So if it's a very important issue, such as this time we had a couple of very important issues, it's very important that everybody be there. And finances and various other things get in the way for people to make it. And I just wish we could get everybody there. I don't mind a vote going a different direction than what I think it should go if I feel like everybody has had their say and everybody who is eligible to vote gets to vote.
How many people do you think were absent? Do you know? I mean, they call roll, right? Do they call roll at the beginning? They do.
And I think, golly, we may be at half the congregations, maybe wow. Fewer than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I did ask you this earlier, but attendance-wise, I think you said it was around 200 people total, maybe?
That's what I remember hearing. In terms of delegates, I think we had officially just under 60 voting delegates. And so I'm not sure how many congregations we have at this point.
Does that mean you would be a voting delegate, but twice? So would you count yourself twice towards that number, or just 60 people in the room voting?
I believe they were counting that number by how many in the room, but I'm not sure about that. Actually, because when they counted the vote and it came out to 39, I think it was actual votes. So 57 may be the actual amount of valid votes in the room.
Okay.
So.
Right. And you think maybe it should be around 100?
At least, I think.
Right. If we had all the congregations represented.
Possibly even more. Yeah.
I guess we'll go into this maybe a little bit later, but I am kind of curious whether or not you think that would have shifted some of the votes. Okay, so if I could be a Messianic superhero, mine would be, I don't know, this actually sounds more of like a supervillain, but what I would do is I would take all of the members of the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations and I would lock them in a room until they came out with one definition of who is going to be considered Jewish in our communities. That sounds a bit like dark villainy rather than being a superhero. But I just feel like it's so desperately needed. Every community, it feels like, has their own standard on who they're going to consider to be Jewish and who they're not. And I feel like we need to have some continuity there, especially because we'll even talk about this later. It really gets at the heart of what is Messianic Judaism,
Yes.
What is it that we are doing as a movement? And if we don't have agreement on that as a basic thing, and I understand not even mainstream Judaism agrees on this, right? The Orthodox believe that it's only through the mother. It's only through maternal descent. The conservative have been recognizing paternal descent, I think since the 50s or the 60s. Reform is way more open than that. And of course, all of them offer conversion, but that's like maybe a future podcast. Anyway, so I guess mine is more supervillain. I'd lock everybody in a room until we had like a unanimous decision on who we were going to consider Jewish in our communities, because I think that it's becoming a bit of a stumbling block as we discuss big issues within the movement. Okay, well, let's jump right into it. Do you want to like set the scene for us first before we talk about the actual votes and kind of the policies that were decided on? It was in Florida, so I'm assuming it was that weird, crazy Florida hot weather where in the afternoon it would just break open and the sky would just pour rain for 5 minutes and then it would go back to scorching hot again.
Well, interestingly, we didn't have rain until the last day. Actually, the last night when we had the Havdalah, we had it outside. And at the moment at which you're taking the candle and you're dunking it in the wine, it began to rain.
Oh, that's
cool. It
cool.
began to rain right at that moment. But that was the first rain we saw.
Wow.
And the next morning when we were flying out, there was rain. But really, no, it was pretty hot, very humid the whole time, very typical. When our airplane got there on Tuesday night, we couldn't even land because there was a bad thunderstorm, a rainstorm at Orlando. We had to be diverted to another airport to refuel and then go back and try again an hour or so later.
Wow.
So weather definitely was a factor. We were at the Doubletree Hilton, which is right by Universal Studios. So the other aspect of this scene is that it certainly was not just our people. We had everybody you can think of. I mean, anybody that goes to Universal Studios was there. So lots of different groups. You will be interested in this, Josh. Guess what else was there?
What?
A journalism group, a yearbook people from all over had come. Yeah.
Do you remember which company it was,
cool.
or was it like one of the national organizations? Was it like Jostens or Life Touch?
It wasn't one of those, but I'm trying to think. But it was from schools from everywhere there, but I don't remember which was the host group. We were kind of busy, but one time we actually walked through their meeting area. A lot of kids there, met some advisors, and I encouraged them. I told them about you. I said they could come to where you are if they wanted to bring their people out there sometime. That'd be fun. But anyway, that was kind of cool. The other part of the atmosphere I think that was kind of odd was when we were having our Havdalah, they had scheduled a Muslim group to be there to celebrate, I think it was the 67th year of their leader. And I don't know who that leader was. I met just the little family and talked to them about it. And my only comment was, oh, you all look so lovely. Because they looked great, the way they were dressed. But I thought how insensitive that the Hilton has no clue what that meant to invite a Muslim group to be there at the same time as we're there. I mean, and they had a lot of people there, so perhaps even more than we did.
Wow. There were no tensions, though. There was no...
I don't think. I didn't see any. I didn't hear of any.
No conflicts.
No. Everyone was very congenial of all the variety of groups that were there. I felt like that part was good. And it was really a marvelous... They have a separate conference grounds there. I mean, part of the facility. So, we weren't really in and amidst everybody all the time. We were pretty much in our own section for our seminars and sessions. So,
okay, that's cool. All right, well, let's just jump right into it. So we, previous to you going, had discussed two things.
Yes.
We had discussed whether or not women should be ordained as rabbis, and we had discussed, there was in particular one congregation that we were looking at that was wanting affiliate status. We'll talk about the different statuses maybe here for a moment. And both of those votes, I think I predicted that they weren't going to go our way. I think you did too, right?
I think we were.
In the end, we were like, it's probably not going to go our way, and it didn't. Both of those votes did not go our way. So which one do you want to jump into first? Which one is like on your mind?
I think the women as rabbis, particularly because I'm also on the credentials committee. So I was hearing all the conversation, watching the applicants and when a woman had applied. And I knew from the persons that were in charge of the committee that they were anticipating it was going to be positive, and that person was prepared to receive smikah, which is to be ordained as a rabbi. So that was all in preparation prior to us even getting there. And just judging by the number of people or the caliber of the people who were sponsoring this change, I could kind of tell that was the way it was going to go. When we got into the actual item during the delegates meeting, there was a moment for various kinds of discussion. I was looking to see if there was a place that I was supposed to speak. So for those who don't know, I did present a paper last summer at the UMJC that I was asked to write, and trying to explain why I believe the scripture tells us that women should not be the senior leader of a congregation. In other words, for us, that would be a rabbi, be ordained as a rabbi. So I kind of made an assumption that everybody there knew about that. But again, you don't know which groups of people are going to be there each time.
Sure.
So I could have reiterated that, but I almost felt like it would be kind of punching somebody in the guts to come up and say it again, you know, and I have a deep love for the woman who was hoping to be a rabbi. Didn't make me agree with it anymore, but I love her. I love her husband, your father.
Yeah.
We were very close with them. So I knew this had always been an aspiration of hers, and I certainly didn't want to do anything, that would cause us to have any animosities, because I think one of the things expressed by several there, including Rabbi Dr. Fisher and also Rabbi Josh Brumbach, is somehow, even when we disagree, we've got to be determined to stay friends, to stay close to each other, and let it just be part of the conversation. And so I really felt that was important not to speak at that time, unless I felt nobody was covering what needed to be covered. But several spoke, including Rabbi Glebe, both the Glebes, both Kirk and his son Matt, both rabbis spoke, and a couple of others spoke. Mostly people spoke. They give 2 microphones so you can come up and talk for or against, and they try to alternate so that people are getting their points across. But somebody made a comment, and I think it's probably true, that pretty much everybody came there knowing how they were going to vote.
Right.
It would have been, I wouldn't have expected anyone to change their vote by what was being said in the discussion part
Sure.
of the delegates meeting. And then when the vote did come back, it was, as I say, they were saying out of 57 possible votes, 39 voted for women as rabbis to be ordained. And I
so
wasn't
that's a
sure.
super majority. That's 2/3.
Yes. Well, the other thing was, by the bylaws, it had to be a 2/3 vote to change that.
Okay.
And so before that, a proposal was made to change it to just a simple majority, and that passed. So therefore, they didn't have to have a 2/3 vote, which was another factor. And basically, they got under a 2/3 vote when you look at the numbers.
Barely.
Slightly, just barely.
That's interesting. So
Yes.
they changed procedure to ensure that it would go through?
Yes.
Wow.
And they got everybody to vote that was there, which
Does
were
that have
going
to be unanimous to change a voting procedure? Because is it changing the bylaws of the union? You're going to need to adjust your mic a little bit, Mom. You keep kind of like leaning. So no, I'm sorry, not the mic, the camera.
Sorry.
Twist it just like a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. When you
Okay.
lean over on
Sorry.
your armrest, you're like dipping out of the
Sorry.
frame. All right, we want to see you. Okay, so
I'm not sure. I think that
how many
might
people
have
had to
been a
vote in
bylaw.
order for that procedure to be accepted? Is that just a
think
majority vote?
It was a simple majority.
That's
It
wild.
was a simple majority vote.
Okay.
And it wasn't a private vote. It was a hands in the air.
Hands.
So I had
Okay.
two in the air because I had 2 votes. So, yes, I thought that was interesting too, because then that pretty much cinched it that based on the people who happened to be there that time, that's part of why I put my superpower. I wish everybody could vote, whether by Zoom or whatever, that everybody could vote when it's something that's important.
Right.
You know, whether they could afford to come or whatever kept them from coming. But so that
Can we
yeah.
go back to that for a second? Now, we both think that this is really important. I think other people do also. Reading the room, as it were, I mean, we openly talked before you even left of this wouldn't be a reason for us to break fellowship. We disagree with this theology, but I mean, they're not forcing us to install a woman as a rabbi of our community, so
Correct.
we can still live life. I think what makes it feel important to me is, will it bring disunity? Will people leave the union because of this vote? And when you were in that room, what did it feel like? Did the people that were opposed to it feel like, man, we are so opposed that this is a make or break? Did anybody say that out loud? Like, hey, if you vote in this way, you may split the union. Did anybody even mention that? Or was that just kind of like not even really part of the discussion?
No, it was mentioned. It was mentioned as potentially divisive.
Okay.
And
when people got up to the microphone to talk, they're like, hey, this has the potential to actually divide the union. What are you doing? Be careful.
no, they didn't put it exactly that way, but they just said potentially divisive. It wasn't like a very strong admonition, but I will say this, that both the Gleebies were only there for the vote. Mm-hmm. They only came for the delegates meeting and did not stay on, but that was not, my understanding was that was their plan anyway. They had to get back home. So I didn't see anybody say anything or act upset. I mean, people were, and it was really at such a point that we were still in the delegates meetings all day.
Right,
I mean, it came early on.
Okay.
So
people came ready to vote. Didn't look like nobody stormed out of the room, flipped
nobody
over a
stormed
table,
out. No
took off their
flipping.
shoe or anything.
No,
Okay.
no,
All right. Okay.
no.
All right. So that one didn't necessarily go the way that we were hoping that it would go. But what about the other one? Now, the other one is a little bit nuanced. And I wonder if maybe a good way for us to start this conversation is there are 3 levels of being part of the union, if you will, right? And I'm trying to use non-specific terms there because the terms themselves are kind of specific. So there's a full member congregation, right?
Yes.
That's one of the technical classifications of a community.
Correct.
And I believe that for that you have to have at least 10 Jewish people that are part of your community, right?
Yes.
So basically you have to have a minyan and you have to be meeting on a regular basis, that sort of thing, right? And you have to pay dues towards the union. Underneath that is an associate congregation, right?
Correct.
And that would be a congregation that has less than 10 Jewish people, but still
have a Jewish presence. I don't know if there's a number.
Is there a minimum number?
As far as I know, there isn't a minimum number, but it's always that you have to. Well, I don't even know if this is said, but I'm assuming that you have to have a Jewish leader.
Yeah, I wonder, right? Because I mean, I'm not even sure that you would have to have a Jewish leader for an associate congregation.
And it could be because maybe they have to go to that status because they lost their rabbi and they don't have one yet, and I suppose that could be the case, but they still have to have a Jewish presence.
I think it's more about attendance by the congregation rather than the leader, right? It's more about how many Jewish people are part of that community.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But
yes.
and then so full members get 2 votes at the delegates meeting.
Correct.
Associate membership, you get 1 vote.
Correct.
Right. And then underneath that is this other category, which is a little bit vague and nebulous to me, and it's called affiliate.
And that was new. This is new.
Right. New.
Right.
How new?
As of this week.
Okay. So it was proposed to be a thing, this meeting, and then people were installed as affiliate people, but not really installed. It's not like they laid hands on or anointed them or whatever.
No,
but
and they weren't even there. People weren't there because they weren't supposed to be there, because affiliate status means you can send somebody to the business meeting, you can have a voice if it's appropriate, and you have no vote. So they couldn't be there yet.
Okay.
So none of them were there.
Okay. So the one in particular that we had an issue with was a congregation that was, I don't know if they were technically applying for affiliate status or if they were being recognized for affiliate status. I'm not sure exactly what that.
They were applying.
Okay, they were applying.
And is it okay to say the name of the group?
I think we should leave that a little vague for people, because that feels like a little bit too on the nose.
Okay.
But I think we can mention some specific things, and so people will be able to guess at it.
Yeah.
So this affiliate congregation on their website, and we actually talked about this in our kosher or treif segment without mentioning them by name, right? On their website, it actually says that they are an online Hebrew roots community.
Hebrew roots, yes.
Right, Hebrew roots community. And we had both said that this was treif, and for a variety of reasons. And it really kind of comes down to the idea of, for me, there is, especially here in California, and I don't know if it is like this across the entire United States, but there is a strong Hebrew roots movement,
Yes.
especially in the Northwest, like so from Sacramento up into even to like Washington State, like all the way up, right? So there's a very strong Hebrew roots community. And just so that we are clear, and people, I mean, we might want to do a podcast episode on this, but one I would recommend is actually if people listen to the First Fruits of Zion podcast. It's called the Messiah podcast. Mom, you should listen to their most recent one.
Oh.
They had a Jewish woman on there who was raised Orthodox who died when she was 16. Her horse fell backwards on her and crushed her. And she met Yeshua. And so she came back. Anyways, I don't want. It's really an interesting conversation. Anyways, they have before. I think it was the week before that, or maybe 2 weeks before that. People could take a look. They have a very in-depth discussion. It could go on for a long time, but I think it's over an hour of what is the difference between Hebrew roots and Messianic Judaism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they go into it very clearly, which, for those who don't know the history of First Fruits of Zion, makes a lot of sense. Because First Fruits of Zion was, in my estimation, a Hebrew roots organization for a long time.
And even, wouldn't we say one law, perhaps?
One law.
I mean, really was one law.
Hebrew roots, and they only changed because of long conversations and prayer and relationship with people in the union and people that are part of other mainstream Messianic Jewish organizations, and a very careful reading of Acts 15 and other things, right? And so finally they actually changed themselves to be a Messianic Jewish community rather than a Hebrew roots community. And so they're particularly relevant when it comes to saying, no, these two are not equal to one another, right? They're not equivalent. When you're dealing with communal life as a leader within a community here, especially in Sacramento, we have many people who call themselves, quote, Torah observant. I'm a Torah observant Gentile. Like, I get that all the time. People email me all the time with that. Or they say,
and they even suggest they're kosher,
right,
and that without understanding the nuances, et cetera.
Yeah,
but anyway.
I'm fully observant. I'm a fully observant Gentile, and it's like, well, okay. That brings up. Oh man, we could podcast forever, Bubby, because we have so many topics. Anyways, Hebrew roots. To just encapsulate it once again, is not Messianic Judaism. Period. Full stop. They are not equivalent. Hebrew roots actually consider themselves an antagonistic sort of a worldview, even from, or theological worldview from Messianic Judaism. They do not consider themselves Messianic Judaism, and they think Messianic Judaism is fundamentally flawed, which we actually experienced firsthand when we had some Hebrew roots people in our community want to dismantle us as a Messianic Jewish community and replace us with a Hebrew roots community. So this community, on their website, it says very clearly that they're, and she was, I even wrote an email to Dr. Seif, Seif?
I always get it backwards, but at any rate, he's the executive director of the UMJC.
I'm going to go with Dr. Seif. I think it's Seif. I don't know. I'm sorry, Dr. Seif.
I-E-Seif, E-I, anyway.
S-E-I-F. So that would be the long E sound? Seif?
I don't know.
No,
it's got to be
would
the
be
I-E.
Would be E.
Yeah.
So it's got to be Seif.
Anyway, it's a German rule. It's
like Rubenstein.
Right. Anyway.
I wrote him an email along with some other people saying, wow, if this person was vetted, they either don't understand what Hebrew roots is and why that's a loaded term, which seemed impossible because the leader of this community has even gone through a master's program of Jewish studies with King's University. So I'm like, how do you go through that program and not understand the difference between Messianic Judaism and Hebrew roots? Or their website hadn't been updated in a hot minute, which is possible. I mean, Messianic Judaism doesn't do great at updating websites. Or there's just a real lack of understanding by people within Messianic Judaism, including maybe Dr. Seif, of there is a growing group of people who call themselves Hebrew roots, who do not actually have the same fundamental aspirations as us, and it's a bigger deal than you think. So that vote actually went against us. It didn't go our way also, right?
Well, as I said when we were talking earlier, it wasn't so much a vote. It was whether or not we were willing to accept a third way of being involved with UMJC. We have the full members, we have the associate, and then it would be an affiliate. And I'm actually looking at what they would be. They have to have 2 leaders. They have to meet once a month. They have to be in agreement with the laws and the membership standards, including the statement of faith, as well as an affirmation of, quote, defining Messianic Judaism.
Right.
So they have to commit to that and to adopt its principles.
And just so people know, you can find all that on the UMJC's website. If you go to umjc.org, you can find defining Messianic Judaism and all the core beliefs of the union. Anyways, keep going.
And then I found out further while we were there that basically the names that had already been presented had come forth to the Credentials Committee to see if they would be able to be accepted and had applied. We were told that if they were vetted and brought in as having been vetted, which all of them had been, then they would have a 1 month time of provisional where they're further examined to determine whether or not, exactly where they're at, that type thing. And even if they pass the 1 month marker, they are still provisional for a full year before they're accepted in as affiliate. So therefore, these people that had applied, if by next year at the conference that all is well, they would be, I assume, accepted in because it's not a vote. It has gone through the hierarchy, the executive committee, basically.
So affiliate status is then different than associate or full member in that it doesn't have to be ratified by a vote of delegates.
That's my understanding, but they do not get a vote either. However, we had a big discussion in the delegates meeting about whether or not they could participate in the conversation, and only as appropriate, because we could see how that could get us way off. They could come in and try to influence, etc. And so only as deemed appropriate at the time.
By whom?
That was, another vague thing. I'm assuming by Barney or whoever's the president. And Barney was put back in as a president for another 2 years.
That's
so
wonderful.
Next year it will be Barney.
Barney's
and he is. So that at that point, whatever has transpired during this year will come forth, and then they will be, I'm assuming, just become affiliates. So therefore, next year, if somebody comes and presents themselves, they also have a waiting period of a year. They can't even be at that meeting.
So to me, I always wonder about the cost and the benefit. So what is the benefit of having a community that is affiliated with us, that has things on their website that feel actually contradictory to what we believe? And what is, so is there a benefit? And then what is the cost? Now, I think there is a real potential cost of like a slippery slope of affiliation, if you will, of, people wanting to be seen as validated by the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations, which is one of the oldest Messianic communities in Northern America, right? And it gives a sense of validity, I think, that they've been, that they've even been in that position, right?
Yes.
So that has the potential cost of us seemingly saying Hebrew roots is valid. And that's a high cost for me, because it is not.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then the second part of that is, what is the benefit to the union? Do they pay dues? Like, I don't understand why.
I thought that was interesting. I saw it here, I believe, let's see, where I think I saw that they can be charged something to have that affiliate status. We pay 2% as full members. The associate members pay 1% of all the money coming into your congregation that's designated as tithes and offering, and not is like just to buy a book or whatever. Right. So we pay 2%. And that's really how they fund the congregation. So they would be paying something, whatever they have them pay. And it may be that minimum of $500 a year I don't know, because that is one reason that I know of one congregation that has been a Havurah, and they wanted to go to affiliate status because they could no longer afford the 500. So it can't be 500, obviously, because so it's something smaller, and it may be dependent upon the group what they can afford under $500, but it's going to be under $500 a year.
I guess my question to you is, am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Or does this feel significant?
I feel it's significant because it's easier. It's much easier to stop something before it happens than take it back after it's done. And that's really about precedence. When you establish something, it's like inviting someone to your home. Once they're in, it's a little harder to get them out.
Right.
And I feel that I'm hoping that will not come back to bite us.
Right.
But I see all kinds of red flags. I mean, not the least of which is that woman in that one group where she's on her website in a talit and a visible big, bold cross.
Right.
And using the symbol of the fish with the menorah and that's supposed to be like we're all one, we're all together, we're all one. And I really think that's what she's trying to say.
Right.
But I think it can definitely skew things. It's, I think this has been part of your mission, is to help people understand that once you believe in Jesus, you don't have to become a Jew to believe in the Jewish Messiah. Right. That does not necessarily mean you need to worship him in a Messianic synagogue. Right. And for many reasons, it would be important that they don't, that they go into the church and be ambassadors, for Messianic Jews.
I mean, we have Gentiles that are part of our community, and they absolutely share our heart and our vision for Messianic Judaism, but they're coming into Messianic Judaism. They're not coming into one law. They're not coming into...
Exactly.
And there is this weird, this conflation sometimes of the two terms of one law and one new man.
Yes,
and
which is totally not legit.
You really
totally
have to
bogus.
Parse those because they are not the same. One law, to me, erases distinction. One new man, to me, makes total sense. Jew and Gentile, one in Messiah, loving him just as we were when we were called, as Jews or as Gentiles, just as you have men and women loving Messiah. And those are two different things that people often will say. They'll just switch them up for one another. They'll say one law, and then they'll say one new man in the next breath. And it's like, whoa, no, those are very different. So,
and you can't be one new man, but not be one law. And but that does not necessarily have to manifest by your worshiping in a Messianic synagogue. And another point on that is it's difficult in Messianic synagogues for those of us, especially smaller groups, to really have the resources to reach out to the people we need to be reaching out to. We're commissioned to reach out to Jewish people, share the Messiah, help nurture them in their relationship with their Creator in a Jewish context, and for their children. And sometimes it's difficult when we're doing we're kind of sorting and dealing with people who are coming in with various kinds of confusion about, therefore, what about them? And back to two terms that get confused a lot or interchanged a lot is same and equal. We are equal in God's love for us. We are equal in families. You have 5 children. They are equal in getting your love, but they are nowhere near the same, nor should they be.
Right.
They are unique individuals. And to me, that's the thing that I think where, we've had discrimination, rob us in many ways. Of course, the discrimination itself, where whole people groups have been ruled out. But a lot of that has come back down to, well, we're really all the same, but we're not. And God made us different. Remember what your dad would always say. God made all these cultures on purpose.
Right.
And something I just mentioned to you in a text today is when people talk about, well, no, we're all going to be worshiping together. We're all going to be having a different identity. We're all going to become Jews now that we believe in the Jewish Messiah. But then why at the end of times does it say that all the nations will be brought in? Right. Well, why would there be nations?
Yeah, God still refers to them as nations. All the prophets still refer to them as nations. Even the celebration of Sukkot up on the mountain of Jerusalem.
That's right.
It talks about all of the nations coming up.
That's right.
And joining along with the Jewish people. And so there's still distinction. Yeah, it's something that we can definitely jump into, I think, another time and have a longer conversation about maybe important terms to define within Messianic Judaism.
Yes, that would be good.
Language is very powerful. There's a reason why right now we see an attack on the meaning of language itself.
Mm-hmm.
And was it 1984? Is that where they would change the meanings of terms? Is that the book where it would talk about or was it Brave?
Well,
it wasn't Brave New World. I think it was 1984. And they would literally purposefully.
Well, Brave New World changed the names. I mean, like mother was a dirty word in Brave New World.
That's what it was.
You could not have relations. You could not have relationships
right.
That had names to them. You didn't have mothers and fathers. You're all test tube babies, basically.
Right.
And taken away. In fact, it's all taking away family connection, which
right.
is so key to what God created.
Right.
So,
and distinction and identity.
And distinction, yeah. And why would God call us by name before we're even conceived? Why would he do that if he did not know we would be distinct?
Right.
Something I wanted to say to your younger son yesterday was, guess what? God called you to be the youngest boy in this family.
Yeah.
I'm sure sometimes he wonders
right.
if that was God at all, But
yep.
I wanted to mention one more thing that came out at the delegates meeting, and that was, it's something that we do with the Credentials Committee. There has been a large upsurge of people coming in who want to be chaplains, and maybe they already are chaplains, but they want to be also endorsed by the UMJC. And some of those people coming in are Jewish and some are not Jewish. So I got the chance to talk to the one woman who came in as a chaplain. She herself has received licensure as a madrika, which is kind of the highest level under rabbi status. She studied a lot. I know she attends a church. Her husband attends a church, and they were both there. And I thought it was interesting what she said. She said, if I'm counseling with people as a chaplain, and it's for the Air Force, by the way, it's military. She said, if I'm counseling with someone, I can counsel with anyone from any faith. But if they want specific counseling related to their faith, I cannot speak to it unless I have some kind of endorsement. So she is both Protestant and I don't know if she has a Catholic backing, but she also now has a Messianic Jewish backing. So she could conceivably, even in faith matters, talk to a Jewish person. So I thought that was interesting, that she felt like it would give her an opportunity to speak to a broader base. Huh. They were delightful people. Yeah. Delightful people, God, loving God, wanting to serve mankind. Wow. And obviously a chaplain, they're wanting to help carry some burdens for people. Right. So I felt okay about that. But they are chaplains under the UMJC, not Jewish, not attending Messianic synagogues, but having gone through the same training that I have.
Right.
So...
now that training is significant, as we talked about, I think, in our first podcast together. What you went through is rigorous.
It's extremely
and by
rigorous.
Some of the top rabbis in our movement.
Absolutely. And for some, they go through the King's University. In fact, we have a woman in our congregation right now who is studying to become a madrika, and she's mostly doing the King's University. And some of the same teachers, like Rabbi Dr. Michael Schiffman, teaches for them as well as for the MJTI. I went primarily through the MJTI, but it's very rigorous because they offer the Masters of Jewish Studies, and they offer the ordination path for rabbis, and then they offer madrika, or madrik, which men can become madrik, women are madrika.
Yeah.
And basically that just means teacher. So mine fell... somebody was telling me, in fact, I think it was this lady chaplain who may go ahead and complete. She has only 3 more courses to complete that are pretty much things like internships with a rabbi, how to preach sermons, some of the typical things you would get in a seminary that maybe she wouldn't have taken as part of the madrika, which I did not have to take as part of the madrika. But it's interesting to me that it's that intense. And I found out something else I didn't know. This may surprise you. As a madrika, I can marry people and bury them. I did not know that. Not that I aspire to do that. Yeah. Certainly not to bury anyone. But I had no idea. And then I found out something that very much surprised me. I assumed there were a lot of madrikot, but there aren't. There are like 3 or 4 in the world.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, that's crazy. So this woman was being recognized for her madrika at the time. So we're still like 5 or fewer people, and it's pretty much, it sounds like it's all women.
Right. Wow.
Which also maybe relates to the other issue about women as rabbis. Some people are saying there's not going to be a huge influx of women who are wanting to become rabbis because those women probably are madrikas right now.
Right.
They have done that much, and we don't have people who've done that, and I certainly don't aspire in that direction.
Yeah.
And this woman can't because she's not Jewish.
Right.
And well, that would be a hindrance for me too.
Right.
Not being Jewish.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, and that goes back to the conversation about conversion, which maybe that's one of the next ones we should jump into.
Yes.
We could tackle that and probably
Conversion and or what, I mean, I don't think it's just a straight conversion conversation. I think it needs to be.
Well, conversion
what
is a
people are
straightforward
called.
conversation, but it's layer upon layer upon layer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When
Yeah.
our community decided on our definition, our halakha for Jewish identity,
Right.
our elders met for a year and a half.
Exactly.
And in each of those, it was probably 2 hours of meeting per week as we went through all these different layers. It's incredibly complex, and there's a lot of nuance based on specific situations. It's very, none of this is easy necessarily. And so I don't ever, and I'm sure you don't either, fault people who don't necessarily see eye to eye. We don't even
Absolutely.
see it. I don't think necessarily eye to eye, although we might be closer than we think. But it's very hard, especially since we're approaching these conversations really from outside of mainstream Judaism also, where those boundaries have been fought over and wrestled over for hundreds and hundreds of years. But they don't even agree.
I know, but I think one thing that does concern me is when I see, when I see somebody putting on a talit.
Right.
To me, that means that's a Jewish person. Maybe they've had a conversion, but that's a Jewish person.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that we've done in the congregation, that there are a few things that a verifiably Jewish person would do. And you don't just run in and do it if you've never been raised Jewish. If you are Jewish, we work with people, help them understand what that means and who they are.
Right.
But I think that's one of the things that makes it difficult.
Right.
And pretty much we've tried to stick with what Israel would say is a Jewish person.
We have, yeah. For the purposes of our community, we have the law of return, and we'll get into that. But then also, we did believe that there should be a distinction then within public worship between Jew and Gentile. That there's not really a point of having a distinction if it doesn't mean anything. If anybody can wear a talit, then it doesn't mean anything. If anyone can get up and read from the Torah, it doesn't mean anything. Like it's hard, it's hard to decide in congregational worship what those things should be and where to draw those lines. And a lot of communities draw them in different places than us, although we have aligned ourselves, I think, mostly because of the conversations I've had with a lot of rabbis over the years. We've aligned ourselves often with what the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations would do. Not all of them, but okay. Well, do you have any final thoughts on the conference before we jump into Kosher or Treif, everybody's least favorite game show?
Yes. Well, I do think I felt like there was a very sweet spirit there.
Good.
And when ending it with the Havdalah outside, it was very joyous. I sent you a video of it.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very joyous. And,
That was cool.
And as I mentioned earlier, at the time at which you put out the candles, because Shabbat is over, it began to rain. I just thought that was God's way of kind of making a point there, you know. But it was sweet.
It is interesting. I brought it up in a drosh, I think about a month and a half ago, but there's been a physical return of rain to the land of Israel in proportion with the amount of aliyah, with the amount of Jewish people returning. The more Jewish people who live in the land, the more rain they get.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's
amazing.
It's indisputable. It's always good to have a good English teacher to keep you in line. It's good. Okay, so we each have, I think, one item that we're going to bring up for kosher or treif. So drum roll, please. Hi, everybody. It's time to play your favorite or least favorite game of all time: kosher or treif. All right. So what's your thing for us to decide whether it's kosher or treif?
Well, I think we discussed one of them last time, so I was just thinking, okay. Kosher or treif. Dancing around with the talit and swinging it in the air.
Okay, so you're going straight to, now this is a trope or like a meme that is really from Rabbi Schiffman. And I mean, to be fair, I also have seen this. When we traveled around with the Liberated Wailing Wall, with the Ministry of Jews for Jesus, we went to a lot of Messianic congregations and we saw a lot of crazy things. I mean, I'm not, okay, first of all, I just have to say, as a person who has led worship for a long time, I understand that there's no one size fits all for worship. I understand that it's going to be unique in each community, and I understand that that might be very pleasing to the Spirit. That might be something that God really delights in. However, I would consider dancing around with a talit often as like part of like dance teams or dance as worship to be treif for a couple of reasons. First of all, if we're actually going to consider that the talit has a specific meaning within Jewish culture, it is a specific embodiment of a specific commandment that was given to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to wear fringes upon the borders of their garments throughout their generations. And it just so happens that over the centuries, Jewish people have made it look a particular way. And it has a meaning within normative Judaism, which is, as we've discussed before, that you were bar or bat mitzvah. And so there's a specific meaning to it, and it's something that's really only worn during maybe like a Shachrit service or during a Torah service when the scroll is going to come out, and it's something that really has like a weight and a cultural meaning. So I'm not going to approach it from the, as I've discussed before, I think it's okay for there to be cultural appropriation. I think people will cancel me for that, but I don't really care. I think cultural appropriation is appropriate at times. However, this is a commandment, and it's something that has a lot of reverence, and people also need to consider the fact that there were Jewish people that died because they were unwilling to give up wearing their talit, because they were unwilling to hide, because they wore their talits like to the grave in World War II. And so you're actually married and buried in your talit. So there's a power in that symbol, and it definitely feels like it's being taken way too lightly when people are swinging it around as if it's a flag. And I understand that some people like have a reverence for it. They feel like it's a prayer shawl, like they go into their closet and they'll pray with it. Even that, it's like, I don't know, do your prayers get more heard, better heard, like because you're wearing a particular garment? Yeshua actually said the exact opposite. Like he said that like prayer is not a show. It doesn't matter what you look like. What matters is what's in your heart. So I would definitely consider it treif, and it's so complex. Yeah. There's a lot of public worship within Messianic congregations that you just wouldn't see within normative Jewish synagogues, and that's okay. But this feels to me like something that just feels like completely disconnected from the emotional and spiritual weight. So what about you?
Well, I think I would say the same thing. It's the significance of the talit is very, very important. In fact, to the extent that we really only have them worn by people who are definitely of Jewish ancestry, but also friends I know and other family members have talked about how much was lost. And sorry, you just referenced it. To take something that's so sacred that people would die for, and to treat it that way doesn't seem joyful to me. It seems disrespectful, and not out of malice, but out of ignorance. Yeah.
Right. And that is the really interesting thing to me about the Messianic movement, is that because it was developed in many ways, well, first of all, it was pre-internet, so people were developing observances in their own communities that
Yes.
fit with the spiritual traditions that they had been part of, and were usually like an amalgamation of all of those. And there wasn't a whole lot of sharing, except for maybe at national conferences, of
Right.
like what traditions we
Right.
should, and those sorts of theological and philosophical conversations really didn't begin until much later. I'd say like 20, maybe 30 years into the movement of like, what does it mean for us to be faithful remnant as Jewish people? Like, how do we remain part of our Jewish people? Especially since they don't particularly want us to remain part of them, right?
Right.
And how do we be faithful to the parts of Judaism that feel like they don't contradict the teachings of Yeshua? It's hard. We have a whole different layer of public worship and ceremony that developed really like unchecked. It didn't flow out of anything else. It was like if the senior leader was like raised, as a Reformed Jew, but then had basically grown up spiritually in a charismatic church, then you were going to have like a charismatic worship service that maybe they said the Shema at. And we've talked about how like even at Messianic congregations, there are Messianic congregations very near and dear to our hearts where a talit is a men's garment, a man's garment. It means I am a man. And so men who are Gentiles and men who are Jews will wear it. And they have racks of them out in front, as you often would for a synagogue. But at a synagogue, everybody's showing up as Jewish, right? And so they're gonna, I forgot my talit, so they'll put one on if they've been bar bat mitzvah. So I mean, man, this goes into all sorts of distinctions between the Orthodox expression with talitot, conservative, whether or not they even do bat mitzvahs, because that was controversial
True.
until fairly recently
True.
within Judaism. There's so much that this is wrapped up in. Okay. So our last one that we'll end with is, and we have actually done this at Beth Yeshua a fair amount of times, actually. Can you play a shofar as part of worship?
Whoa.
So, for example, we have done this. There's a particular song that was written by my dad, and it's based off of Psalm 150. And it talks about praising God with the blast of the shofar, with the blast of the horn. And so when we would come to that line, we would blast one of those like really big, ginormous, beautiful shofars. It is actually referenced in the Psalms as a way to praise God. And it is interesting because the shofar, if you look at it, has a bunch of different uses. It has uses in war. It has uses in public worship, alerting the people. Like there's all sorts of different things that the shofar was supposed to do. So, anyways, where do you land on that?
Wow.
Is it kosher or treif?
Wow. Well, I'm probably not the best one to judge that one. Really, it's so important for Rosh Hashanah, the whole Feast of Trumps, to have the blasting of the shofar. I think for me it would be a matter of whether it's done in reverence, maybe, but in general, I would think it's probably considered to be treif.
Right.
But maybe that's just the Gentile side of me. I don't know.
It's interesting. I will tell you that within communities that we went to that were MJAA, it seemed much more frequent.
Prevalent, yeah.
Yeah, you definitely see it. And then there was a congregation. Oh man, where was it? I think it was in Minnesota. I can't remember. It's been too long. But there was a congregation where everybody there played the shofar.
Oh.
Everyone.
Oh, wow.
And it was almost like saying amen.
Wow.
It was like when they would like agree with things and like when they were really into worship, all of a sudden just like everybody would just start blowing the shofars and all in different keys, and it was just wild. It was just wild. So man, I don't know. I agree. There are times when we're told to use the shofar. The Feast of Trumpets or the celebration Yom Teruah, We're supposed to hear the blast of the shofar. It's supposed to awaken something in us spiritually. I think it is supposed to be a call to the days of awe,
Exactly.
which culminate in,
Right.
in Yom Kippur and the Day of Atonement. And it's like a spiritual thing. So we have to treat it as thus. And I'm not saying that other people aren't, but I agree with you. I'd say that a lot of it comes down to the heart, kind of like wearing a talit. Like, are you doing this out of respect and in an attempt to actually like be in alignment with the rest of Jewish life, or are you doing this as just like it's fun to play with these symbols? And it's interesting too, because to me this kind of goes into maybe the difference between Messianic Judaism and people discovering the Jewishness of Messiah.
Absolutely. I was going to say that because I don't think I've ever seen a Jewish person do that.
Right.
It's always been somebody who's not Jewish who's doing that. And there's an exuberance and a joy and excitement because, we've discovered Jesus is a Jew and et cetera. But I think we still have to be careful and be sensitive to what, there's so much history with these various things that are associated with the Jewish people.
I agree. Well, it looks like we're getting really close to the hour mark, so we should probably wrap things up. As always, I just want to thank people for being with us today, and thank you, Mom. I really appreciate these conversations.
It. Yeah.
It's really good. And once again, if people have ideas or feedback, and you want to send us an email, it's at Rosh, ROSH, at bethyshua.org, or you can check us out at bethyshua.org and use our contact information there on the website. So till we see you next time, bless you guys. We love you, and we'll see you soon, we hope. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can always visit bethyshua.org for more.